on a night that changed the world.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends on this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond.
It was the close contest that ultimately wasn't. Trump took the presidency and congressional power beyond.
Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor. That's what it is. It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try. We have to try. And it's going to happen. Success will bring us together. I've seen that.
God's on our side, and we need to make America great again.
The Hispanics moved the needle on this election. We did a lot, and it means a lot because we're conservative. We are about family, God, and freedom.
God wins. Trump wins tonight.
For all the talk of battleground states, there was no real contest. This was a watch party in Philadelphia. Kamala Harris had to win the state of Pennsylvania. Losing it was the moment she lost it all.
Fantastic. The long roads, terrific. The numbers don't lie.
I can't say anything more than thank you, God. Thank you, President Trump. God bless America.
It had all started so optimistic at this Kamala Harris watch party in Washington, D.C.
Oh, say, can you see?
But it didn't last. The American anthem ultimately was a lament for the loser. Optimism faded as they watched the results and the figures fell away. They didn't hear from the Vice President overnight. She will speak in time. She'll speak first to Donald Trump in a concession call.
You won't hear from the Vice President tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you.
There had been fears over safety at this election. As the country cast its vote, security was increased in the capital, Washington, D.C. Bomb threats disrupted polling stations in Florida, Georgia, and in Pennsylvania. On so many levels, Donald Trump is the history maker. A first former president to be criminally convicted. A second to win back the White House after losing it. And then there was the campaign, assassination attempts, and all that.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
So much will flow from this. America's decision, one that it's made for a second time. There's a reason they called this the most consequential election. What those consequences are, this country is about to find out. And so are we all. James Matthews, Sky News, in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, America wasn't just voting for a new leader. It wasn't just the presidential race taking place yesterday. And the Republicans proved winners all round. Well, they've now regained control of the Senate, reaching the 51 required for a majority. And they also look set to retain control of the House of Representatives. These are the latest results where all 435 members faced re-election. OK, well, David Levin's still with me, and that's one of the things that we're looking at, the fact that with the control of the Senate, potentially with the control of the House as well, Donald Trump will have unbridled power.
Yes, and throw into the mix that there are some vacancies on the Supreme Court. Really, it is a triple whammy for Donald Trump as he takes the keys back to the White House. And it'll be very interesting to see what Trump 2.0 looks like. We're going to be exploring that, I think, not just for days to come, but for weeks to come. We know domestically he has some policies that some people would consider radical in terms of immigration and the economy. And particularly his foreign policy, because Donald Trump has always had an isolationist view. He wants to detangle America from global conflicts. He's talking about perhaps withdrawing hundreds of millions of pounds in international aid. He's even suggesting that he could withdraw America from NATO. That will be something that the rest of the world will be thinking about today. And I think in the days to come, we will look back on this and wonder, how did the pollsters get it so wrong? How did the media perhaps get it so wrong whenever we were suggesting perhaps America was about to elect its first female vice president? My view would be that two things will be critical when history writes this chapter. The fact that Joe Biden remained on the ticket for so long, despite that disastrous election debate earlier in the year. He effectively had to be removed by his own party in July. And that momentous day, that day that many Americans will never forget, where they saw the image live on television of Donald Trump, a former president, the Republican candidate to return to the White House, being shot and wounded, blood streaming from his ear. He rose from the platform, punched his fist in the air and encouraged his supporters to come out and fight. And my goodness, they didn't have to do that yesterday.
Yeah, those were the words, fight, fight, fight. David, thanks very much for the moment.
Well, welcome to Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, arguably the most important battleground state. It is worth a huge 19 electoral college votes, and Donald Trump turned it from blue to red overnight. Only the second time that has happened since 1988 and George Bush Sr., both, of course, by Donald Trump. This is the Blue Wall, the Great Lakes State, the Rust Belt. When you look behind me, hard to recognize it as the old manufacturing. This is a state that has shifted, certainly, from its manufacturing base, transitioning to newer industries and businesses, a large energy sector, abundant oil shale deposits, critical in terms of Kamala Harris's view about fracking. Agriculture, still the second largest industries, but big life sciences here and health industries too. But critically for Pennsylvania and the other Blue Wall states, Wisconsin and Michigan, there is an issue of cost of living. That draw of Donald Trump about inflation as an issue, the promise, the nostalgia almost for the first 3 years of 2016 to 2019 before the COVID pandemic, where the economy was doing well. And many people, when they went to vote at the ballot box, asked themselves, were they better off under Donald Trump? And he told them that they had been. Well, Trump also did well in the other battleground states. As you can see, he took North Carolina, Georgia, as well as Pennsylvania, and also Wisconsin, which took him over the magic number of 270 electoral college votes needed to become president. We are still waiting for the other key swing states of Arizona, Michigan, and Nevada to call. In Michigan, certainly with 97% of the vote in, it is likely to head more towards Kamala Harris. There's some caution in declaring that state. Well, Sky's Cordelia Lynch is in Atlanta, in Georgia, one of the battleground states that went to Trump and did so early, Cordelia.
Yes, it certainly did, Anna. Kamala Harris was unable to build on the support that Joe Biden had garnered in 2020. He'd turned this previously very Republican state blue then by getting the suburban voters more diverse, more affluent on side, and getting a big African-American turnout. Kamala Harris just wasn't able to build on those numbers. But Georgia is also the story of the rural voters, of white men and women, both college and non-college educated voters, who put immigration and the economy top. There was a lot of discussion in the state that perhaps reproductive rights, the abortion bans were going to be a big vote winner for Kamala Harris, but that just hasn't happened. And I think it's interesting. I spent time in Cobb County, one of the key swing counties that went to Joe Biden in 2020. And I was quite struck in the past few days hearing from men and women saying, yes, it matters to us, reproductive rights, but not as much as the economy. They had a very visceral, real feeling that they were worse off and that they needed someone that they felt could manage the economy better. Now, this is a state, Anna, where abortion is illegal at 6 weeks. There have been a lot of very fierce battles around this, and I've been speaking to abortion activists in the state this morning who say they are utterly devastated, that this is going to be incredibly damaging for generations to come. And I think we will spend the next few days, weeks and months analysing Kamala Harris's campaign strategy here in the state and beyond as well. There was a lot of breathless discussion around the female vote. The hope was that she'd be able to sort of broaden her appeal, that she'd get a shy Republican vote on side, women quietly voting but perhaps not telling friends, family, their husbands that they were going to do so because they were concerned about the future of themselves, about their daughters as well. That doesn't appear to have happened, and I think we will see the repercussions of that play out in the days to come, Anna.
Yes, very interesting, and certainly some Republican strategists talking about a real realignment now of politics in America and how both the Democratic Party and indeed the Republicans live with the wash-up of that will be absolutely fascinating. We're still waiting for other states to give their results. Michigan, I've mentioned, Nevada too, both of them more than 90% of the vote counted there. Nebraska as well, which breaks, it doesn't have a winner-takes-all system. We're waiting for the second congressional district centered around the city of Omaha. And in Arizona, 63% of the votes have been counted there. Let's take you there now. Another important swing state. Shingi Marurike has the latest from Scottsdale in Arizona.
Now we're looking at Arizona as part of a set of Sunbelt states that Donald Trump might win, as part of a set of all of the 7 swing states that Donald Trump might win. As it stands, just over half of the vote has been counted, and we understand that Donald Trump is ahead, but Kamala Harris is ahead in the county of Maricopa, which makes up 6 in 10 voters here in Arizona. So we'll watch that count as it unfolds. Arizona has a great tradition of people voting early, but it also has a great tradition of keeping us waiting for all of the ballots to be counted. And we were told originally by election officials it might take 10 to 13 days. But I think it's worth reflecting on how we're here, the position we're in with Donald Trump, now the president-elect for a second time, because we have spoken to so many people about those concerns you mentioned. First of all, the economy, which is something that people here said that they trusted Donald Trump on more than the current establishment, the current presidency and vice presidency of which Kamala Harris was a part of, but also illegal immigration. As you mentioned, this is the only swing state that borders Mexico, and people here said that they were tired of an influx of migrants, to use their words. But what I think Donald Trump has done, and we've seen rear its head here, is he has shifted the electoral calculus, and he has managed to pull in a bigger coalition of voters. And as we heard in that screen there, that coalition of voters involves a number of Latin American voters. Here in Arizona, 1 in 4 voters are Latin American, and we've spoken to quite a few over the course of the last few days, and there you had the crossover of their perceived strength of Donald Trump and the economy, and the fact that they are second-generation immigrants. Their parents have citizenship, they have citizenship, so they agree with his rhetoric on immigration and his hardline stance. So it will come as no surprise if Donald Trump is able to flip Arizona back to being a red state as part of this rather emphatic-looking victory.
Yes, and Shingi suggesting that Arizona is really a microcosm of all the issues that have played into this election. Well, let's bring in our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire, who has been poring over all of the detail of the results. Tom.
Yeah, we've been looking at these results, and all before the election was how a candidate might win. Now we know who has won, Donald Trump, president-elect. We can talk about why that happened. But let's look at this map that is being painted increasingly red. Donald Trump with those leads in those great battleground states. And it was about these battlegrounds to start with. Georgia, Donald Trump flipping that and doing very, very better than Joe Biden did in 2020. We go up North Carolina, which was supposed to be a battleground state. Actually, Donald Trump won this pretty comfortably, more than 3 points in it in the end. Wisconsin, the state that won him the election. Actually, this is the highest that any Republican candidate has done since 1984. So it is a convincing win. But also, it's not just about these battleground states. Let's go to a very blue corner of the map. Let's go to Vermont, the bluest state there is. But, you know, Harris wins that comfortably. She is not winning as comfortably as Joe Biden did. There is a shift to Trump even here in a very blue part of the world. The same goes for Massachusetts. Let's go in there again. Get up to Massachusetts. Again, there's been a big shift from Trump gaining that share of the vote in a way that perhaps we hadn't anticipated. And you can replicate that in New York too. You know, New York, we think of, again, being very, very blue state. Again, it's a Kamala Harris win, but this is way down from where Joe Biden was. There's still some vote to count. But this is where Trump has been making gains all across the country. So it's not just about the battleground states. And that's interesting because when you think, okay, so why are people voting for Donald Trump? And we've talked about demographics. We'll talk about his coalition a bit more throughout the day. But when it comes to Donald Trump himself, and when it came to the exit poll, let's see what people think of Donald Trump, because that was one of the questions that NBC, our partner, they asked, opinion of Donald Trump. Most people have an unfavorable opinion, yet he's made ground in all of these states. In all but 2 states, he has increased his vote shares. And that may be to do as much with the issues as with the personality, because when it comes to those issues, Donald Trump had a clear lead on the most important ones. So these were the key issues for voters ahead of this election: border security and immigration, inflation and cost of living, economy, protecting democracy, and abortion. You can see here, Donald Trump had a big lead on all of those, especially immigration, especially inflation and the economy. When it came to protecting democracy, actually, there wasn't that big a difference between Trump and Harris. And that might come as a surprise because the Harris campaign made it a big part of their pitch to the electorate. But Republicans feeling the same way on the other side, thinking that Donald Trump was the best person to protect democracy. So when it comes to all that, and you can understand, especially when it comes to what it's like, the experience of the economy. This shows real-term wages under the Trump presidency and under the Biden presidency with Harris as vice president. And you can see that under Donald Trump, they did get a lot better. There was actually a 7% increase overall. They fell under Biden and Harris. So when it comes to the economy, that real lived experience might have made a big difference, especially when it comes to, you know, we're talking about where the economy was really, really important in these northeastern battleground states. So when it comes to this, we talk about demographics, we talk about the personality of these 2 candidates. It does come down to issues as well. So we'll be unpacking the relationship between those and what it's meant for this map over the course of the day.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. So here in the blue wall states, we're still waiting for Michigan. Bear in mind that those 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, have tended to vote as a bloc, except for in 1992. Donald Trump flipping them in 2016, Biden flipping them back again in 2020. Michigan still not called. After 97% of the vote counted, Donald Trump's lead is down to 106,000. Those remaining votes to be counted lean further towards Kamala Harris, which is why that state has yet to be called. We'll wait and see if the 3 states vote once again as a bloc.
Anna, thank you. Well, there's already been plenty of international reaction to Donald Trump's victory and the impact that his second presidency might have. During Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer and New Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch congratulated the president-elect on his victory.
Can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory? As the closest of allies, the UK and US will continue to work together to protect our shared values of freedom and democracy. And having had dinner with President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago, I look forward to working with him in the years to come.
The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order." And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is in Westminster for us now. And Sam, Kemi Badenoch there quite prickly in her insistence on Sir Keir Starmer apologising and setting out the relationship that he is to have with President-elect Donald Trump.
I think there's no doubt, Gillian, that overall Downing Street will be disappointed that it's Donald Trump in the White House from January once again, rather than Kamala Harris, because Donald Trump poses all sorts of difficulties for Keir Starmer's administration. And to be blunt, the new Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, picked up on some of them. But if we just look at the various things that he's facing as a consequence, I mean, first and foremost, Keir Starmer's just got to navigate a really tricky political line, because both he and his Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, have made extremely disobliging comments in the past about Donald Trump, at a point where they probably didn't anticipate that this moment would come along where those remarks would be thrown back at them. They've been trying to forge closer relations over coming months, over the past few months, including that dinner that Keir Starmer referenced, which took place at Trump Tower, which I know the Starmer team are quite pleased about, saw that as a gesture of friendship. But Donald Trump is a very toxic figure on the left, and really, frankly, amongst many Labour Party figures. So if Keir Starmer tries too hard to cozy up to Trump, he...
Hello.
Problems when it comes to politics. When it comes to policy, there are no smaller challenges either. Rachel Reeves did a massive budget last week, lots of borrowing, lots of spending, but didn't leave herself a great deal of wiggle room. But the arrival of Donald Trump in the White House does just mean that there is the potential for more uncertainty. Uncertainty in the Middle East, uncertainty in Ukraine. Could that push up oil prices? What does that do to inflation? And given the lack of wiggle room, could that have an impact on Rachel Reeves and the public finances? Could inflation creep back here? Those sorts of problems are now going to become the Chancellor's problems in the weeks and months to come. And then there's the stuff in the sort of global domain. I mentioned Ukraine. Is Donald Trump going to try and bring the conflict there to an early close by being the broker of a negotiation between Russia and Ukraine? Does that mean that Ukraine is effectively forced to give up more land than it might otherwise want? Does it give Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the first to praise and welcome and congratulate Donald Trump, does Donald Trump give Israel much more of a sort of carte blanche to pursue its goals in the West Bank and in Lebanon? But what is the consequence for that in the wider Middle East? Could that lead to bigger war and escalation? All these questions suddenly back on the table. This is a government that's going to have to be on its toes and alert to political danger all around, Gillian, as a result of what's happened overnight in America.
Sam, thank you. Well, as Sam was saying there are fears that President Trump could try to force Ukraine into a settlement of the war with Russia that would see it concede territory. But President Zelensky has posted a message on social media saying, "I am looking forward to personally congratulating President Trump and discussing ways to strengthen Ukraine's strategic partnership with the United States." Let's speak now to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. And this victory for Donald Trump, Deborah, what does it mean for Ukraine?
I think the speed with which Volodymyr Zelensky posted that message on social media really underlines how closely the Ukrainians have been watching the outcome of this race with huge trepidation. Donald Trump, in his election campaign, he sort of said that he would be able to end the war in a day. He said he'd end the war very quickly, but he hasn't said how. And there are real concerns amongst not just the Ukrainians, but also other NATO allies who have, for the last nearly 3 years now, been supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia. Concerns that Donald Trump, who has got this very different relationship with Vladimir Putin than Joe Biden does. Joe Biden has been very clear that he views Putin as an enemy. But you'll remember from Donald Trump's last term in office, he actually agreed to Putin's denials about claims of Russian interference in the 2016 US election in defiance of his own intelligence agencies. And so there is an unpredictability there, which obviously is causing concern, but equally it could provide an opportunity. There are voices within Europe who are wondering where the Ukraine war goes, how it will end, and maybe this new development of a Trump White House come January could be a factor that forces both sides to make uncomfortable compromises, but compromises that could end the war. But there is a huge risk there because Volodymyr Zelensky has made very clear he's been going around European capitals with his victory plan, which does not see Ukraine conceding land to Russia. And so there is a big potential, if Donald Trump does want to make good on this pledge to end the war, that he instead creates a much bigger problem, internal unrest even greater inside Ukraine, and division amongst NATO allies who will see anything that is viewed as an appeasement to Russia as a betrayal, and that would have serious consequences for the unity of the NATO alliance too.
OK, Deborah, thank you.
Well, coming up next, we will take a closer look and more on the implications of a Trump presidency and more from the battleground states like here in Pennsylvania as Democrats lick their wounds. No Democrat has won the White House without Pennsylvania since 1948. The same is true for 2024. Back in a moment.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we are to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories.
Don't skip ahead here. Skip ahead here to your dream school with the Duolingo English test. Get your language score in just 2.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
People did not see that message, and that's just it.
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Ads saying Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here. The transgender
American
operations while people are in prison. And people think, people in America think when you go to jail, you don't get any rights like that.
Gail Bass in Phoenix, Marty Griffin in Pittsburgh, thank you for joining us. Lucy, what I think is really interesting today is because we've spoken, haven't we, over weeks, over months, to people, to voters all across the US here on BBC News. And it's really interesting, I think, to see which of those messages resonated with people. You know, which ones, as Gail was describing there, really cut through. And I think at the bottom of all of this, and certainly people I've been speaking to here, when it came down to it, it came down to the economy. I think for so many people, when that moment came yesterday, for the ones who were voting in person, when they were pressing that button on the electronic voting machine, the thing that really drove their vote was how well off they feel, how much it cost to fill their car with gas, how far their wages are going. And in the end, the personalities, all of those things are important, but it really comes down to those basic issues, doesn't it, wherever you are in the world.
But there are also a lot of people who
Indeed,
really
Anna,
do
it's
like
fascinating conversation as well. I loved it listening to
when
Marty
you've
and
been in
Gail
America
just sort of delving
speaking to
into
Trump supporters,
what they think
what is
happened
it that they
overnight
like
and
about
why
him?
we've got
What
the
is
size
the
of this
thing that they
victory
say to
for
you,
Donald Trump.
appeals
Good to have you with us,
the
Anna.
most
See you
about
throughout
him?
the day.
I think it's something that we see in politics around the world now. He's anti-establishment. I mean, in many ways, he's not, because he served in office for 4 years. But to the minds of his base, his silent majority, as they call themselves, he is an outsider. He is the businessman. He is the reality TV star. And in some ways, Kamala Harris, because she was pinned so much by her opponents, but also because she's still vice president, attached to the Biden administration, it was very hard for her. And you saw in interviews when she was asked the questions, how different are you going to be to Joe Biden? How are you going to do things in a different track? She sometimes struggled with that question because it's hard to uncouple yourself when you're currently sitting in, the vice president's role. And I think that's it, is that he played himself as the outsider. And there's no doubt about it. I've seen them both at rallies. He has an enormous amount of charisma, whether you agree with his policies or not. He is a showman. He knows how to work the crowds and the cameras. And he's given people a feeling. People that I spoke to said, look what he did with foreign policy. Look how he met Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. It's those moments that people take away with, and also the kind of thing that comes down to politics the world over, Lucy. Who would you rather have a drink with? And a lot of people that I met just felt that that was Donald Trump.
And people felt that they were able to put aside the allegations of sexual misconduct. They were able to put aside the fact that he's a convicted felon, the fact that, you can do a fact check on a rally and he lies multiple times. This is something that the voters are able to just put aside, Regina. How do they justify that?
I'll bring you back to a conversation that I had with a group of Republican women in Georgia, which of course ended up going for Donald Trump. It was in the summer. Kamala Harris was doing a rally in town. And I asked them what they were thinking. And they said they didn't like his language. It was going back to 2016, the locker room talk. They described themselves as Reagan Republicans. He's their hero. But they don't like Donald Trump. They don't like his rhetoric. So I asked them, well, who are you going to vote for? Are you going to go for Kamala Harris? And they said, well, we do like the idea of this country finally electing a woman, but we don't like her. And when I asked them, well, what don't you like about her? They wouldn't put their finger on it. They mentioned the economy, as we heard in that discussion there as well. But I think in the end, I'd like to call them hovering voters. These women, often, the so-called soccer mums that we talk about a lot in US elections, would have gone into the voting booth. They would have thought, OK, we don't really like him. But then they think about their gas prices, they think about the border, and they put a cross in Trump. I mean, that's clearly what happened in some sense.
OK, Regina will be back with you shortly. But we are waiting to hear, of course, from Kamala Harris. Yet to concede. She's yet to address her supporters. We're not quite sure when that's going to happen, but we are expecting it to be sometime today. She left quite dejected crowds, actually, when they left her watch party, and we heard that she wasn't going to appear before the final results came in. But we will, of course, keep across when she does appear. But let's look now at Donald Trump's path to victory and what happened in those 7 crucial swing states. Lewis joins us now from the newsroom, and he's been analysing the results as they've been coming in. Lewis.
Lucy, thank you. I'm going to start with the popular vote, actually, just the simple number of Americans voted for each candidate. Kamala Harris here, just over 66 million. Donald Trump, 71 million plus. So a clear victory for Donald Trump in the popular vote, but that is just a moral victory. You can become president without getting the most votes of the actual voters across the country, and that's because it's decided actually by electoral college votes. Basically, you've got to win votes in each individual state to do that. Secret number is 270. Once you're past 270, you win and you are President-elect. Donald Trump has done that. You can see he's currently on 279 seats. The way he did that, the last win was Wisconsin. That's 10 electoral college votes. We're going to dig a little bit deeper to see the kind of patterns that happened across the country. If we go down here, we look at Milwaukee. You can see that's blue. Kamala Harris, Democrat. Significant win for her in that area. Urban area, that's to be expected, but just around outside, these counties outside, all Donald Trump, plenty of people were watching these, and Kamala Harris was unable to improve on Joe Biden's showing in those areas and indeed drop below in some, and that meant Donald Trump was able to win. Another quick example to dig into. Going to look now at what happened in Pennsylvania. Another county within it is Erie County. It's known as a bellwether county. So basically, it's always pretty close. Whatever way it actually decides to vote is usually the way the whole country votes. And here you can see that's what happened. Donald Trump taking it back in 2020. Joe Biden, the Democrats, took it before that, 2016, Donald Trump. So Erie County holding up its reputation as that bellwether state. Right, let's take a look at where we are in terms of the latest to not be actually certain on any results. Basically, you can see this sea of red. OK, let's start with the 4 states that have been projected already as a Donald Trump win. We know about those. But these 3 here, we do not have projections yet. But you can see Donald Trump ahead in all of them. So let's look now at how, through the night, Donald Trump actually did it. Let's look at those 7 swing states that coming into this election basically looked like they could go either way. Well, pretty quickly, they started going Donald Trump's way. Let's start down here, North Carolina, Georgia. Kamala Harris, at this point, still in the race, but then came Pennsylvania. It's a crucial state because it's got 19 electoral college votes. That's the most out of any swing state. And now we have Donald Trump on 266. He basically just needs 1 more of these swing states. And that happened, as we mentioned, with Wisconsin. That took him over the line. That's basically the story of the night. But it wasn't just presidential elections taking place. Let's take a look at Congress, because clearly the president's power is greatly enhanced if Congress backs him and backs the laws and changes he wants to make, and isn't if it doesn't. So the Senate, you need a simple majority of 51 to be in control of the Senate. And look at that number, 52. Republicans have it already, with some seats still up for grabs. And let's take a look at the map. Now, only a third of seats in the Senate are up for grabs right now. So ignore the grey here. That's where no elections are taking place. But you can see the red stripes here, Ohio, West Virginia, Montana. These are wins for Republicans. That's taken them up to 52 so far. And just finally, Lucy, just for completeness, we'll look at the House. 218 seats you need there. This is the lower chamber. Republicans on 203. It'll be a while before we know the results there. But Donald Trump, in his speech a few hours ago, declaring that the Republicans have held on to the House. Whatever way you look at it, a very good evening for the president-elect, Donald Trump.
Indeed. Lewis, thank you so much. He is the first former US president to face criminal charges. Donald Trump has, for much of 2024, faced 4 simultaneous prosecutions. And these are allegations that range from his attempt to cover up a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 campaign, to his attempts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Now, President-elect, what does this result mean for these legal cases? Well, let's speak now to Jason Tuchinski, who is a partner at Holzman Vogel and a Republican election lawyer. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. I've just been looking at some of the top Google searches from around the world following the result. And a lot of people are asking this question about the legal cases. So we'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, can I just get your reaction as a Republican to the result?
I mean, the results are absolutely stunning. Given the pre-election polling, I think a lot of us thought we were going to be in a lot of post-election legal contests around the country, and it does not look like that's going to happen.
It's been peaceful as well. We've had a result that was much quicker than people were expecting. So do you expect that to be the case? Because we had been painting a picture of these teams of lawyers in all the swing states ready to take some of this to court. That's just not going to happen.
At least not at the presidential level. I mean, I have done a lot of work in elections, and a person I was on a panel with a few years ago said, I'd like to repeat the election administrator's prayer, dear God, don't let this election be close. And it appears, at least at the presidential level, that this was not a close election.
Okay. So what happens to these cases that are against Donald Trump at the moment?
So the criminal cases by the federal government probably go away completely very quickly after he takes office. The state cases will probably be paused during the duration of his presidency because there's a series of laws that essentially say, in most cases, civil and criminal claims against the president in state court essentially will get postponed. So, for example, the precedent is, frankly, Bill Clinton and some of his legal troubles that he had when he was president. A lot of those got postponed, but, he did sit for a deposition in a civil case while he was president. So the civil cases and the criminal cases might proceed, but on a much slower track than if he were not president of the United States.
I think for people watching around the world, this is confusing because it's to do with US law as well. But the one that people are going to remember is the hush money payments case, convicted of falsifying records related to hush money. Now, that is the first one because we are expecting a sentencing to take place later this month, I think November the 26th. What will happen there?
I suspect that's going to get postponed while the president's lawyers and the lawyers for the state of New York figure out what they're going to do with that case. I mean, it certainly is inconceivable that a state judge in New York could really impose penalties against the sitting president of the United States.
So what are his options? What are the judge's options?
Delay. And appellate review is probably in the cards as well by the state courts in New York. So I think those are kind of the two things that I expect.
Could you explain to us?
Delay is probably most likely.
Okay, Jason. Can you explain to us as well what happened in the Supreme Court, the ruling about former presidents being entitled to a degree of immunity from criminal prosecution and what that actually now means?
Sure. So essentially what the Supreme Court said is if, you know, in a post-election context, you're looking at criminal charges against the president, you have to determine whether or not it was within the scope of official duties. So, for example, you know, I think the reason that the Supreme Court did what it did was that the lower court kind of went too far and was too categorical and said former presidents are never protected from criminal liability. And that doesn't really seem to be the case. Like, I'll give you a great example. There was controversy over when President Obama was president and he launched a drone strike, I believe in Yemen, that killed 1 or 2 Americans, you know, as a result of the drone strike. I don't think anybody believes that he should be prosecuted for murder because he ordered that drone strike in Yemen. But on the other hand, if he had taken a bribe to launch that drone strike that killed the Americans, you know, there would be a different sort of calculation. And I think what the Supreme Court was saying is, the lower courts, prosecutors, and the trial courts need to look at the context of what it is a former president is accused of doing to determine whether or not it was in the scope of their official duties or not.
So this does not then provide absolute immunity because there are Democrats who are worried this just allows Donald Trump now to do whatever he wants. There are no guardrails.
I don't think that's an accurate reading of the Supreme Court decisions.
Okay.
I think that's an exaggeration.
All right, Jason, really good to get your thoughts. Jason Torchinsky, thank you very much for joining us, just taking us through all of those legal cases that Donald Trump has been facing. Well, alongside the presidential race, Americans have also been voting in congressional elections, as we were hearing from Lewis as well. Mr. Trump's future control of the levers of government appear to have received a major boost, with the Republicans projected to win control of the Senate. In the House, though, the House of Representatives, where all 435 seats were up for grabs, Republicans are also leading there. Several races, though, are still undecided. And if the Republicans do end up controlling the House, Senate and the White House, it will grant Mr. Trump broad powers to pass laws. Regina is still with me. There's a lot here that needs explaining. So can you give us the basics then?
Well, first of all, we talk about this being a real clean sweep for Donald Trump because he didn't just win the Electoral College, all those contests that Lewis was talking about in all of the different states to get past the 270 mark. He also won the popular vote. So the national vote across the country, he got the highest number of votes in that. He's also won the Senate, and at the moment it looks like he could win the House of Representatives. We don't know yet. Now, it's the Senate and the House of Representatives, which are the kind of two houses of Congress. They pass laws. So a law will start in the House of Representatives, a bit like the House of Parliament here in the UK, and then it will move on to the Senate. Now, they have got the Senate 51-40, so they haven't crossed the 60 mark, which, without wishing to go into the minutiae of what a filibuster is, makes it a lot easier for a party to pass policies.
Because I think, Regina, what people want to know is, does this mean that all of Trump's policies are going to sail through now? It's going to be easy for him.
It's going to be easier. Without crossing the 60 mark, there'll still be an opportunity for challenges in the Senate. But yes, it does embolden him. It does make it a lot easier. And the entire victory does, in a way. You know, he, in many ways, has confounded what a lot of his critics thought he could do. He has a huge mandate, not just because he's likely to get both houses. I mean, as I say, let's see how the House goes. But also because he's got the popular vote. So in other elections, sometimes a president will the Electoral College and his opponents will say, well, you didn't win the popular vote. So he can say that now, and it does give him a freer range to put in some of his policy agenda. Now, it's unclear what exactly he will go for, but there has been a document that a lot of people have been talking about, of course, Lucy, Project 2025, which was written by a number of his advisors. He says he's not going to bring that project into office, but if he does, at least draw on some of it, it's a very right-wing conservative agenda there.
We haven't heard from Kamala Harris. I think there was a lot of disappointment. We heard from her supporters that she told them to go home. I just wonder, Regini, what you think the timing will be of that today? What are the considerations that are being made at the moment about when she will appear and what she will say?
I think there'll definitely be a lot of shock in her camp. We've heard from one of her co-chairs who told everyone to...
Actually, I'm going to let you continue that thought, but let's have a listen to her co-chair speaking.
I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the promise of America. We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough moment for her. What do you think Democrats are feeling at the moment about her campaign, about the amount of time that she had to run, the fact that, you know, when Joe Biden stepped back, possibly didn't give her enough time, he should have done that earlier. What sort of things are Democrats feeling today about what's happened?
I mean, Lucy, there's definitely going to be an inquest, because I think just a few days ago there definitely was momentum in the Democratic campaign and a feeling that she could do it. I mean, she had a bit of a boost after the convention, after she was officially confirmed as the Democratic nominee. Then I think the feeling was that it really was close. But again, it goes back to 2016 as well. Did they get their polling wrong? Did they get their ground game wrong? They really did have a very strong get-out-the-vote operation, particularly in states like Pennsylvania, where she needed to win to get a path to the White House.
That the Democrats were much more organised, that their grassroots movement was a lot stronger than Donald Trump's. They had more money at a grassroots level. Lots of questions there too.
And I think one of the other things from watching her when she started after the convention, started kind of doing the media rounds, doing those rallies, and as I say, I went to one of her early rallies. One of the criticisms of her was that she wasn't giving enough interviews. And another criticism was that she wasn't clearly spelling out her policies. Now, her supporters said there was a double standard, and they would say, look, Donald Trump takes to a stage, he sometimes waffles and goes off on tangents, and it's not always clear what his policies are.
But then he will articulate a policy with one phrase and sort of nails them. That's what people remember.
Exactly. And then it comes back to what we've talked about throughout this morning, which is that the economy was the number one concern. And I remember one of her first policy press conferences was about how she was going to eliminate price gouging in supermarkets and keep prices down, which is, of course, a really big concern, because even though some economists will say things are getting back on track when it comes to the US economy, people aren't feeling it. But she wasn't able to communicate that in a way that people understood. Well, that's certainly what a lot of people said, including her critics. So there was a disconnect somewhere. Now, was it partly because she just wasn't as au fait with the art of campaigning? Yes, she ran a primary a long time ago, but that wasn't in this season. And many will say, when they have this post-mortem in the Democratic Party, should Joe Biden have stepped aside a lot sooner and given her a better chance?
And Virginia, I know you have some pretty close sources within the Harris camp.
I do.
And they've been messaging you. What have they
had to say? So I've interviewed her uncle before, and he just sent me a message just now. I asked him how he was feeling. He said he feels pretty down, not just for my niece's loss, but for the course of international laws and humanitarian concerns during the Trump presidency, and what he says is the irreparable damage that it may cause. I mean, you know, there will be a lot of people in America. We obviously have acknowledged the momentous moment this is for Donald Trump and for his supporters, and it's huge. But there will be many people who aren't just upset and disappointed that this wasn't a moment that a woman was finally elected in the United States, but also a woman of colour. She's half South Asian and her father was Jamaican, so half Jamaican origin and half South Asian. And there will be many people who will say, well, where does this leave the kind of path of diversity in America?
Yeah, Regina, thank you so much. Not only that, but also people asking, where does this leave America's relationship with the rest of the world? And we have been getting reaction in from world leaders. It's been mixed. There's been jubilation in Israel and other right-wing governments, tempered by some caution elsewhere. But lots of people are wondering what's going to happen with some of those conflicts that are happening in the world at the moment, the war in Ukraine being one of them, and the relationship that President Trump has had with President Putin. So let's bring you the views now of our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, who is in Sochi.
Well, it feels like the Kremlin is going out of its way to give the impression that it's not excited at all by Donald Trump's victory. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said that, as far as he knows, Vladimir Putin has no plans to congratulate Donald Trump. He said America is an unfriendly country which is involved directly and indirectly in a war with Russia. Now, I think this pouring cold water onto the Trump victory is partly the result of what happened in the first Trump term, when the Kremlin had very high hopes that Donald Trump would improve US-Russian relations. It didn't work out. Having said that, there is no doubt that what Donald Trump said on the campaign trail will have been much appreciated by the Kremlin. He didn't criticize Vladimir Putin, unlike Kamala Harris, who called Vladimir Putin a murderous dictator. And he seemed to question the scale of US military assistance to Kiev. So that will have gone down well with the Kremlin. Certainly here in the mountains above Sochi at the political discussion club I'm at right now, political pundits, political scientists seem to be very happy that Donald Trump has won the election and looking forward to him coming back to the White House. One quite prominent political scientist with Kremlin connections told me that he thinks that under Donald Trump, the United States will retreat from its status as a global superpower.
Steve Rosenberg there in Sochi. One other thing we'll be discussing in the coming hour here on BBC News is what's happening in terms of the markets, shares in US companies, and also the value of the dollar have spiked upwards as Donald Trump swept to victory. Also interesting, the value of the cryptocurrency Bitcoin also soaring to a new record, and shares in American banks jumping. So we'll keep across that for you as well. But first, let's remind ourselves about how this astonishing evening, this historic evening, played out in the United States.
We do now have the state of North Carolina coming into us, a projection that we can make at this hour. Here we go. North Carolina projected for Donald Trump. All those rallies, all that footfall from the Trump campaign in North Carolina, especially in the past 5 days, appears to have paid off.
This is huge. This is the second swing state now that has been projected as a win for Donald Trump. This is Georgia, and it's 16 electoral votes.
We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight.
Major projection to bring to you now, a really, really huge one. We can project Pennsylvania for Donald Trump.
We came in with high expectations, and once again, the polls were wrong.
And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
We're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country.
That projection coming to us from our CBS News partners. Donald Trump, America's 47th president.
We're going to take a look at how Donald Trump did it through the numbers. The numbers tell the story. 279 is the key number at the moment, well over 270. 270 is the number of electoral college votes that you need to become president. The way the president is elected is by getting those electoral college votes by winning states. Just a quick reminder, red states there are Republican, Donald Trump, blue are Democrat, Kamala Harris. The final one that took him over that 270 mark was Wisconsin, 10 electoral college votes. Let's look inside Wisconsin. We're going to look at one county and specifically here, Sauk County. Trump winning only a few hundred votes in it actually, but compare that to last time round, Joe Biden won it, Trump didn't. Flipping that over, told the story about how Donald Trump, now president-elect, did it. So, how did the night pan out? You may remember before the election, people talking about those swing states. We had 7 swing states. Here, they're in grey. So go back to the beginning of the night. Donald Trump took North Carolina first, pretty quickly, Georgia afterwards. Kamala Harris, at this point, not out of it, but then came Pennsylvania. Absolutely crucial. 19 electoral college votes, nearly gets Donald Trump all the way just there. And then we had the final one, Wisconsin, which took him over the line. There are still some bits of grey here. We don't have the projected results for everything yet. Let's look at the latest. These 7 swing states, we were expecting them perhaps beforehand to be a mixture of blue and red. Whoosh, lots and lots of red, as you can see. The one with the ticks are the ones we've already had projections for. Trump projected to win. These are what we're still waiting